The night Vesper Calloway pulled me out of the alley, I thought I was already dead. I had been 3 days without food, 2 without shelter, and approximately 90 seconds away from finding out exactly what the man with the broken bottle was willing to do to a girl who had nowhere left to run. The rain was coming down in the specific cold way that rain comes down in this city in October, the kind that gets inside your jacket and stays there. My hands were shaking so badly I could not have held the bottle even if I had managed to take it from him. He smelled like cheap whiskey and something underneath it that I did not want to name. He was smiling. If you enjoy stories like this, my Patreon has uncensored. Too hot for YouTube stories in the description. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and subscribe before we keep going. He never finished the smile. A black town car came around the corner of the alley with the kind of slow, deliberate authority that belongs to vehicles that have nowhere they need to be in a hurry because the world rearranges itself around them. The headlights washed the wall behind him. He turned. His face changed. I watched a man go from predator to prey in approximately 2 seconds, which is the kind of education you do not forget. The back door of the car opened. She stepped out. I was 23 years old, soaked through, half-starving, and completely sure I was about to watch a different version of the same nightmare unfold from the other side. And I still, even in that state, even in that rain, registered her with the specific clarity that some people generate around themselves whether you want to look at them or not. She was tall, not in the obvious way, in the way that came from how she occupied the space between her shoulders and the ground, economical, unhurried, the carriage of someone who had never in her adult life walked into a room she could not leave on her own terms. She was wearing a long charcoal coat that looked like it cost more than the apartment I had lost 6 weeks ago. Her hair was pinned back. Her face, in the rain and the headlights, was the most unbothered face I had ever seen on a human being. She did not look at the man with the bottle. She looked at me. Her eyes did a circuit that took less than a second and seemed to catalog every piece of information available. The bruise on my cheek, the wrong fit of the jacket I was wearing, the way I was holding my left wrist against my ribs because I had landed on it when he pushed me, the absence of any bag or belongings or evidence that I had a destination. The circuit ended back at my eyes. She did not seem surprised by anything she had seen. Then she looked at the man. "Walk away," she said. Her voice was lower than I expected, quieter than I expected. It did not raise. It did not need to. She had said 2 words in the tone of a woman who had been issuing instructions to dangerous men for long enough that she no longer required any of the theater of doing so. He looked at her. He looked at the car. He looked at the second man who had stepped out of the front passenger seat, broad, silent, the kind of presence that made you reconsider every choice that had led you into this alley. He dropped the bottle. He walked away. I watched him go and I thought, very precisely, that I had just been saved by something I did not understand and that I was not necessarily safer than I had been 90 seconds ago. She turned back to me. "Can you walk?" she asked. I said yes. I do not know if I meant it. My legs had stopped registering as my legs about an hour ago, which I think had less to do with cold and more to do with the specific exhaustion that comes from running out of options. "Get in the car," she said. I did not move. "I am not asking you to come home with me," she said. Her voice had not changed register. "I am asking you to get out of the rain. There is a hotel 4 blocks from here. I will pay for a room. You will sleep. In the morning, you will decide what you want to do next without a man with a bottle making the decision for you. I want to tell you that I asked her name. I want to tell you that I evaluated my options like a person with options. I did neither of those things. I got in the car because the alternative was the alley, and the alternative was the man returning with a friend, and the alternative was my body finishing the slow shutdown it had begun 2 days ago. She got in after me. The door closed. The car pulled away from the alley and into the rain. The interior smelled like leather and a perfume I could not place something dry and clean and expensive, the kind of scent that does not announce itself but stays in your throat after the wearer has left the room. The seats were warm. The driver did not turn around. The man in the front passenger seat did not turn around. She sat across from me on the long bench seat and looked at me with the same unbothered attention. "What is your name?" she asked. "Marlo," I said. My voice cracked. I had not used it in 2 days. "Marlo Hayes." "How old are you, Marlo Hayes?" 23. "When did you last eat?" I thought about it. The thinking took longer than it should have. "Tuesday," I said. "It is Friday," she said. "I know." She did not say anything for a moment. She looked at the window, at the rain sliding across it, at the city moving past in the particular shimmer that happens at night through wet glass. Then she reached into a small compartment beside her seat and produced a bottle of water and a wrapped bar of something I later learned was the kind of food bar professional athletes eat. She handed both to me without ceremony. Slowly, she said, "You will be sick if you eat it fast." I was sick anyway, 20 minutes later, but by then we were at the hotel, and the man from the front passenger seat had paid for the room, and she was walking me through a marble lobby with one hand at the small of my back, light enough that I could have stepped away from it and firm enough that I knew I was not expected to. The room was on the 18th floor. It had a bed I could have lived inside and a bathtub I could have drowned in and a view of the city that someone with money had paid extra for and that I, in my current state, could not have valued at any price. She did not come into the room. She stood in the doorway. "There is a card on the desk," she said. "It has a number. If anyone tries to remove you from this room before noon tomorrow, call it. I will speak to them." "Who are you?" I asked. She looked at me for a long moment, the first long moment she had given me. Her eyes were a color I could not name in the hotel light, somewhere between gray and gold, the kind of eyes that ended up belonging to women who were never described accurately because no description was ever sufficient. "Vesper Calloway," she said. I waited for the rest. There was no rest. "Why did you stop the car?" I asked. A small pause, the smallest pause I would ever get from her on this question, which was its own answer in the long run. "Because the alternative was not stopping it," she said. She closed the door. I sat on the edge of the bed in a room I could not afford and ate the rest of the food bar in pieces and threw most of it up in a marble bathroom that probably had its own staff and lay down on top of the covers because I did not want to. Ruined the sheets and slept for 13 hours straight. When I woke up, there was a tray of food on the desk. There was a folded set of clean clothes in my size. There was a card with a phone number on it, and nothing else. There was also, I would learn over the following weeks, a complete reorganization of my life happening in the background, executed quietly by people I would not meet for some time, paid for by a woman whose name I did not yet know how to research properly and would soon learn was not the kind of name you researched casually. Vesper Calloway, I would discover, was 36 years old. She had inherited her father's organization at 29 after a series of events the newspapers had described as a tragedy, and the rest of the city had described in lower voices. She controlled, depending on which lower voice you trusted, somewhere between a third and half of the unofficial economy that ran through the eastern half of this city. She had never been arrested, which the newspapers found suspicious and the lower voices found self-explanatory. She lived in a building she owned on the river. She did not give interviews. She did not appear at charity galas. She did not, by all available evidence, have any social life that the public version of the city was permitted to know about. She had pulled me out of an alley in the rain because the alternative was not pulling me out. I would spend most of the next year trying to understand what that sentence meant. The day after the hotel, the card on the desk rang. I answered. A woman's voice, not Vesper's. Lower register. Professional told me that a small studio apartment was available 3 blocks from the river, that the rent was paid for 6 months, that there was a job waiting for me at a bookstore owned by Calloway Holdings if I wanted it, and that none of these things came with any obligation except the obligation to take care of myself. I asked the woman if I could speak to Vesper. "Miss Calloway is unavailable," the woman said. "She has asked me to tell you that you do not owe her a thank you." I sat in the hotel room and held the phone for a long time after she had hung up. I took the apartment. I took the job at the bookstore. I bought my own clothes with my first paycheck and returned the ones she had left for me by handing them to the woman at the front desk of the building Vesper Calloway lived in, which was the only address I had been given and which the woman accepted without comment, as if women returning expensive clothing to her front desk was a routine occurrence. For 3 months, I did not see her. I worked at the bookstore. I learned the inventory. I started sleeping through the night, which had not been a thing I had been able to do reliably in 4 years. I gained back the weight I had lost. I called my brother in another state and told him I was alive and stable and that I would explain when I could explain, which I did not yet know how to do. In the 3rd month, I started leaving small things at the front desk of her building. Not gifts. The bookstore had a damaged books shelf copies that had been slightly water damaged in shipping or had small cosmetic flaws that prevented them from being sold at full price. I would find a book on that shelf that seemed like something a specific kind of person might find interesting, and I would write a small note on the inside cover, and I would leave it at the front desk on my way home. The notes were not love letters. The notes said things like, "This one has good footnotes," or "Page 142, the line about the river," or "I think you would like the parts where she is wrong." I did not know if she read them. I had no evidence that she did. Then one Tuesday in February, I came back to my apartment after closing the bookstore, and there was a small package on my doorstep, wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a book I had never seen before. A first edition of a novel I had loved since I was 19, in better condition than any first edition of that book had any right to be in. There was a folded note inside. The note said, "Page 142 was the right line. V." I sat on the floor of my apartment with the book in my lap for a long time. I learned, slowly, that Vesper Calloway had a particular relationship with the people she had decided were under her protection. She did not announce this protection. She did not perform it. She simply made decisions in the background that ensured certain things did not happen to certain people, and she did this with the same unbothered efficiency she had used in the alley. I learned this because the man with the bottle, whom I had assumed I would never see again, was found 6 weeks after our encounter in a part of the city I had never been to, with a broken hand and an apparent decision to relocate to another state. I learned that another woman who worked at the bookstore, Pia, a quiet, brilliant person who had escaped a husband who had hospitalized her twice, had been moved into an apartment in Vesper's building with her 2 daughters 2 years before I started, and that the husband had not been able to find them, despite trying. I learned that the bookstore itself had been bought by Calloway Holdings the year before, specifically because the owner had been about to lose it to her landlord, and that the owner did not know who had saved her from the landlord. I learned that Vesper Calloway had been quietly maintaining a small constellation of women's lives in this city for years, and that none of those women knew about each other, and that this was the way she preferred it. I asked Pia once, in the back of the bookstore on a slow afternoon, if she had ever met her. Pia looked at me for a long moment. "Once," she said, "the day she moved us in. She came to the apartment to make sure the security system was working. She stayed for 10 minutes. She did not ask me any questions. She told me where the emergency button was, then she left." "Did you ever?" I started. Pia shook her head before I finished the question. "She does not want to be thanked," Pia said. "I learned that fast. I send her a card on Christmas every year. She has never written back. I send it anyway." "Why?" I asked. "Because she does not want to be thanked," Pia said, and looked at me with a specific kind of steadiness, and so I send the card. I started sending cards too. Not Christmas cards. Smaller things. A note with the books. A drawing my niece sent me that I thought was funny. A photograph of the river on a morning I had walked past her building and the light had been particularly good. I never expected a response. Sometimes I got one. The responses were always one line, always signed V. The first time I saw her again was in April. I had been at the bookstore for almost 6 months. I was closing a loan the owner trusted me to close, which was its own quiet revolution in a life that had not contained much trust until then, and I was sweeping the front entrance when a black town car came around the corner of the street with the slow, deliberate authority I had learned to recognize. I stopped sweeping. The car parked across the street. The driver got out and walked into the coffee shop next door. Did not look at me. The back door of the car opened. Vesper Calloway stepped out. She crossed the street in a long charcoal coat that was not the same coat she had worn in October, but might as well have been the same coat. Her hair was pinned back. Her face was the same unbothered face I had remembered every day for 6 months, slightly more interesting now that I was not half-starving and could actually see it. I stood with the broom in my hand and watched her walk toward me and felt every cell in my body recalibrate to her presence. She stopped in front of me. "Marlo," she said. "Vesper," I said. She looked at me the way she had looked at me in the alley that fast circuit, the cataloging, the eyes that ended up back on my eyes. The cataloging this time was different. I could see her register the weight back on my body, the cleaner clothes, the way I was standing with the broom like a person who had been doing this work for months and was good at it. I could see her register that I had survived. Something at the corner of her mouth moved. "Page 142, she said. "The line about the river." "I know," I said. She looked at the bookstore for a moment, then back at me. "Are you well?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Are you safe?" she asked. "Yes," I said. She nodded, as if confirming a calculation she had been running for 6 months and had finally been able to verify. "Good," she said. She started to turn. "Vesper," I said. She stopped. "Will you come in?" I asked. "Just for a minute. I would like to make you a coffee." She looked at me for a long time, long enough that I understood she was not weighing whether to come in. She was weighing what coming in would mean. Then she said, "Yes." She came in. I locked the door behind us. We were closed, technically, and the only way to have a coffee with anyone after closing was to keep it private. I made her a coffee at the small espresso machine the owner kept behind the counter. I had learned how to use it in my first month. She drank her coffee black. I had guessed black, which turned out to be correct, and she registered the guess with the smallest possible adjustment of her eyes. She did not sit. She stood at the counter with her coat still on and her coffee in her hand and looked at the bookstore around us with the specific attention of someone who owned the building and was familiar with every inch of it. "You are good at this work," she said. "I am," I said. "Marie says you are her best closer." "Marie is my boss," I said. "Marie does not know that you sign her checks indirectly." She did not confirm or deny that. "I learned it on my own," I said. "Not from her. From other people in the city who told me their stories." "Which people?" she asked. Her voice was level. Not concerned. Just informational. "I am not going to tell you," I said. She looked at me. I said, "Because they did not tell me to tell you. And the system you have built in this city seems to depend on the women you have helped not knowing about each other. I am not going to be the one who damages that." A long silence. Her eyes did something I had not seen them do. Something at the edges. Not soft. Just adjusted. "That is correct," she said. "I know it is correct," I said. She looked at me for another long moment. The coffee in her hand had gone untouched. "I cannot do this," she said. "What?" I said. "I cannot," she said again. "Whatever this conversation is becoming, I cannot." "Why?" I asked. She set the coffee down on the counter. Carefully. The way someone sets down something they have been holding for too long. "Because I pulled you out of an alley 6 months ago," she said. "And the framework of what happened in that alley does not include a coffee in a closed bookstore in April. There are reasons for the framework, Marlo. They are not reasons I can suspend because you are good at making coffee, and you understand my system better than I expected you to. I am not asking you to suspend the framework," I said. "Yes," she said. "You are." I looked at her, the unbothered face, the composed shoulders. The hand that had set down the coffee with the specific carefulness of a person who had registered every implication of every action she had taken in the past 10 minutes and was choosing to leave before she took any more of them. "I am asking you to come back," I said. "Sometime. When you decide the framework can hold a coffee." She did not answer immediately. Then she said, "Marlo, you do not understand what I am." "I think I do," I said. "You do not," she said. "You understand the part of me that pulled you out of an alley. You do not understand the part of me that can pull other people into alleys when the situation requires it." I waited. The bookstore was very quiet. The light from the street outside was the specific blue of an April evening just after sunset. The kind of light that makes ordinary spaces look like they are underwater. Then I said, "I have been at the bookstore for 6 months. In that time, I have heard exactly 3 stories about Vesper Calloway from people who were not employed by Vesper Calloway, and all 3 of them were stories about women you helped, and all 3 of those women are alive and stable and their husbands are not. I have not heard a single story from anyone in this city, anyone about a woman you have hurt. I have looked, Vesper. I have asked. I have learned to ask carefully. I am not naive about what you do. I am telling you that what you do appears to be one specific thing, and I am not afraid of the specific thing." She looked at me for a very long time. "You should be afraid of the specific thing," she said. "Maybe," I said, "but I am not." Another long silence. She picked up the coffee, drank it in 3 measured swallows, set the cup down. "I will come back," she said, "when the framework can hold it. I am not promising when." "That is acceptable," I said. She nodded once. She walked to the door. I unlocked it for her. She stopped in the doorway and looked at me one more time, and her face was the same unbothered face it had been for 6 months in my memory, and underneath it, very small, was something that had not been in my memory at all. "Page 142, she said. "I know," I said. She left. I locked the door behind her. I stood at the counter for a long time with the empty coffee cup in front of me. I picked it up. I washed it. I put it back. I finished sweeping. I thought, walking home in the April evening with the river smell in the air, that I had just had a conversation with one of the most dangerous women in the city, and that what I had felt during the conversation was not fear, and that this was information about me that I had not previously had access to, and that I would need to think about it for some time. I thought about it for 2 months. She did not come back to the bookstore in those 2 months. The town car did not pass by. The notes I left at her front desk were occasionally answered with one-line responses. Page 87 was harder. V. Or, "The footnote on 203 is wrong, but I see why you marked it." V. I kept leaving the notes. She kept answering some of them. It was not enough, and it was the most consistent presence in my life. In June, the city held a charity gala for a foundation that had been quietly funding women's shelters across the eastern half of the city for almost a decade. I had not known about the foundation until Marie put up a flyer in the bookstore. She told me she went every year. She told me that her neighbor across the hall, Pia, my coworker, also went every year, with her 2 daughters, who were now 7 and 9. I asked Marie who funded the foundation. Marie looked at me with a specific kind of look that I had become familiar with from the women in this city who had been quietly receiving Vesper Calloway's protection for years. Calloway Holdings, Marie said. I went to the gala. I bought a dress at a consignment shop 2 streets from the bookstore. It was navy and simple and fit me well. I had not worn a dress in a year and a half. I wore my hair down. I bought a single ticket with my own money, which the gala accepted without question, and I walked into the ballroom of a hotel I had never been inside and stood at the edge of a room of people who had been living a different version of this city than the version I had been living in for most of my life. She was there. Of course she was there. She was there because Calloway Holdings was the foundation and the foundation was Calloway Holdings, which I had known in advance and had walked into the room knowing. She was wearing a black dress that did not announce itself. Her hair was up. She was standing near a window with 2 other women I did not recognize, and she was holding a glass of something amber that she was not drinking. And she was, even from across the room, the most composed person in a room of composed people. She saw me. I knew the second she saw me because the line of her shoulders changed in a way only I would have noticed, which was its own piece of information. She did not come over to me. I did not go over to her. I stayed at the gala for an hour. I drank 1 glass of champagne. I talked to 2 strangers about books. I watched the foundation chair give a speech about the importance of the work. I watched Vesper Calloway not look at me from across the ballroom for 60 consecutive minutes. At the end of the hour, I walked toward the exit. She was at the exit before I got there. She had crossed the room in the specific way she crossed rooms, the way that did not announce itself, the way that ended with her standing by the door at the moment I needed to leave through it, which had been calculated. Marlowe, she said. Vesper, I said. She looked at me. The black dress, the hair up, the glass of champagne I had been holding for 45 minutes and had barely touched. You came, she said. Marie put up a flyer, I said. Marie, she said, with a small tone. Marie, she said again. She is not subtle, I said. No, Vesper said. She is not. We stood at the door of the ballroom. The gala continued behind us, a band starting its second set, the sound of glasses. The polite murmur of people who had paid a great deal of money to be in this room and were committed to enjoying the time they had paid for. Will you walk me out? I asked. She looked at me for a long moment. Yes, she said. She walked me out. Through the lobby of the hotel, through the front doors, into the June night that smelled like the river and warm pavement and the particular smell of a city that had decided to be summer. The black town car was waiting at the curb. The driver was inside. The man from the front passenger seat was nowhere visible, which I had begun to understand meant that he was visible only to her, and only if needed. She did not get in the car. She turned toward me. We were standing on the sidewalk in front of a hotel where I had once spent 13 hours sleeping on top of the covers because I did not want to ruin the sheets, which I realized in that exact moment with a small specific shock. This is the hotel, I said. She looked at the building behind me. Yes, she said. You did this on purpose, I said. The gala has been at this hotel for 9 years, she said. I did not move it for you. I also did not change the venue when I knew you might come. What does that mean? I asked. She looked at me. It means, she said, that the framework is becoming more difficult to maintain. I felt my heart do something specific that it had not done in some time. Vesper, I said. She held up one hand, a small gesture, not refusing me, asking me to wait. I have not changed my position, she said. I am telling you what I am observing about my own framework, not asking you to do anything with the information. I am not going to do anything with it, I said. I appreciate that, she said. We stood on the sidewalk in the June night. The driver did not turn around. The doorman of the hotel had developed the specific blank-faced doormen develop when they realize they are watching something they should not be watching. I would like to walk you home, she said. I would like that, I said. She told the driver something through the window I did not hear. The town car pulled away. I watched it go, which felt significant in a way I could not fully articulate. Vesper Calloway on a sidewalk in a black dress without her car was a different category of thing than Vesper Calloway in any of the contexts I had previously seen her in. We walked. It was 22 blocks to my apartment. We walked all of them. We did not hold hands. We did not touch. We walked side by side at a pace that was slower than my usual pace and faster than a stroll, and we talked about the gala, and then about the foundation, and then about the specific work the foundation funded, and then about a book I had left on her front desk 3 weeks earlier with a note that said the parts about the kitchen are the best parts. She had read the book. She had specific opinions about the parts about the kitchen. We argued mildly about the protagonist's mother. I won the argument. She conceded the point with the small exact smile that only happened in her eyes and never on her mouth. By the time we reached my apartment building, it was after 11. The street was quiet, the bookstore was 3 blocks away, the river was 4 blocks away. I knew this neighborhood now in the way you know a place you have lived in for 6 months and have walked through every day at every hour. We stopped in front of my building. "Thank you for walking me home," I said. "Thank you for letting me," she said. A pause, the June night, the street. "I would like to invite you up," I said, "for another coffee." She looked at me. "The framework," I said. "I know." She looked at the building, then back at me. "I cannot tonight," she said. "Okay," I said. "It is not because I do not want to," she said. "I want you to be very clear on that distinction." "I am clear," I said. She nodded. Then she did something she had not done at any point in the 7 months I had known her. She lifted her hand and, very briefly, brushed a piece of hair away from my face. The contact was less than a second. It was the lightest possible version of a touch. Her fingers did not linger. They did the necessary motion and then withdrew, and her hand went back to her side, and she stepped back half a step on the sidewalk. I felt that touch at the back of my throat. I felt it in my ribs. I felt it in the specific place behind my heart where I had been keeping every hesitation I had not articulated about this woman for 7 months, and I felt all of those hesitations relocate themselves around the touch in a configuration I had not previously occupied. "Good night, Marlo," she said. "Good night, Vesper." I went up to my apartment. I did not look back. I knew, the way you know certain things in your body before you process them, that she would stand on the sidewalk until I was inside and the door was locked, which she did, and that she would walk 3 blocks before she called the car back, which she also did, because she did not want me to watch her get in. I sat on my couch in my navy dress with my shoes still on for a long time. I thought about the framework. I thought about the hand on the side of my face. I thought about a woman who had pulled me out of an alley in October and had spent 7 months keeping the alley at a distance, and had touched my face on a sidewalk in June for less than a second, and had walked away because she had decided that was the most she was permitted to give me. I thought with a clarity I had not had access to about anything else in my life, that I was going to have to be the one to break the framework, because she had built it, and she was not going to be the one who took it apart. That decision took me into July before I knew what to do with it. The way it ended up happening was not the way I had expected, which is the way most genuine things happen. Someone tried to hurt me again. Not in an alley, not in the way the man with the bottle had tried, which had been the older, more obvious version. This was a man who came into the bookstore on a Tuesday afternoon in early July with the specific kind of friendliness that is not friendliness at all. He asked me about a book. He asked me about my schedule. He asked me where I lived. I answered the first question and not the other two, and he smiled at me in a way that said he had not expected me to answer them anyway and was planning a different way to find out. I called the number on the card that night. Vesper picked up on the second ring. I told her about the man. I described him. I described the questions he had asked. I told her that he had not done anything I could legally describe as a threat, and that I knew exactly what he was, and that I needed her to know. She was quiet for a moment. "Are you home?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "I will be there in 20 minutes, she said. She was there in 18. She came in. She sat at my small kitchen table. She listened to me describe the man, again, with the kind of attention she gave to information she was going to act on. She asked 3 precise questions. She got 3 precise answers. Then she said, "He will not come back." "How do you know?" I asked. She looked at me. "Because I will make sure of it," she said. I looked at her. "Vesper," I said. She held my gaze. "I am not asking you to hurt him," I said. "I know," she said. "You are not asking. I am telling you what will happen." I looked at her for a long time. The unbothered face, the composed shoulders, the specific stillness of a woman who had pulled me out of an alley 9 months ago and had been quietly arranging the architecture of my safety ever since. "What does making sure look like?" I asked. "It looks like him deciding, by tomorrow morning, that he would prefer to focus his attention on a different city," she said. "He will reach this decision through a conversation. The conversation will not require any physical contact. He will be persuaded by information about his life that he did not realize anyone else had access to. That information already exists. I have access to it. I will use it. He will leave. That is, I said. I know what it is, she said. I am telling you because you asked. I am not telling you to ask for permission. The decision is mine. I sat at the table. The kitchen was small. The light was the soft yellow of the lamp I had bought at a thrift store with my second paycheck. The woman across from me had just described in clean professional sentences the specific way she was going to remove a man from my life by tomorrow morning. Thank you, I said. Do not, she said. I want to, I said. She looked at me. Then I said, stay. She blinked. The first blink I had seen out of her in 9 months. Marlo. The framework, I said. I know. You have told me. I have heard you. I am asking anyway. A long silence. The kitchen. The lamp. The hum of the refrigerator. Why? She asked. Because I am not afraid of the specific thing you are, I said. I have not been afraid for a long time. I have been waiting. I have been respecting the framework you built because I understood why you built it, and I understood that I was the person who arrived in your life under conditions that required it. I have done the waiting. I am 23 years old, and I have been in your specific orbit for 9 months, and I have learned this city through the women you have quietly kept alive in it, and I am asking you, Vesper, to come into my apartment tonight and stay long enough to drink one more coffee with me. She looked at me. The composure, for the first time since the alley, did something. It bent. Not broke, bent. It was the smallest possible version of bending. Her shoulders did not move. Her face did not move. The bend was somewhere behind her eyes, in the place she had been holding everything she had not allowed herself to acknowledge for 9 months, and I watched it bend in real time, in my kitchen, at 11 on a Tuesday in July. 1 coffee, she said. 1 coffee, I agreed. She stayed for the coffee. She stayed for 3 more hours after the coffee, because we were talking, and because the talking was the kind of talking you do not pause without a reason, and because neither of us, by some unspoken agreement, was looking for a reason. At 2 in the morning, she stood up at my kitchen table and said she should go. I walked her to the door. She stopped in the doorway, the same way she had stopped in the doorway of the hotel room 9 months ago. The same composed silhouette, the same hand at the door frame. She turned around. She looked at me for a long moment that was not a small moment, and her face was not unbothered, and the framework was not in the doorway with us, and I watched her decide something I had been waiting 9 months for her to decide. She did not kiss me. She lifted her hand again the same way she had on the sidewalk in June, and she traced 1 finger, very lightly, along the line of my jaw, from my ear to my chin. The motion took perhaps 2 seconds. Her eyes were on mine the entire time. Then she stepped back. I will see you, she said. When? I asked. Soon, she said. That is not an answer, I said. I know, she said. It is the most accurate answer I am capable of giving you tonight. She left. I locked the door. I stood in the kitchen with my hand at my jaw where her finger had been. I was not crying. I was not laughing. I was inside something else, some third state I did not have a word for. The specific country a person enters when a thing they have been waiting for 9 months has finally begun and has not yet resolved, soon turned out to be 6 days. 6 days during which the man from the bookstore did in fact leave the city. I learned this not from Vesper but from Marie, who came in on Friday and told me that a regular customer named Daniel had moved to another state for what she described, with the specific neutral tone Marie used for things she had been told not to discuss, as professional reasons. I did not ask Marie how she knew. Marie did not offer to explain. We restocked the philosophy shelf in companionable silence and did not return to the subject. On the 7th day, the town car came around the corner of my street at 7 in the evening. I was sitting on the small fire escape outside my kitchen window, which I had taken to using as a porch in the warm months because the apartment had no other outdoor space, and because the fire escape had a view of the river through a gap between 2 buildings, narrow and specific, the kind of view you had to know about to find. I was reading the book Vesper had returned to me in February, the one with the right line on page 142, for the 4th time. I saw the car. The car saw me. The back window came down. Vesper looked up at me through the gap of the fire escape with the same unbothered face I had memorized over 9 months, and the small thing underneath it that had been bending in my kitchen at 2 in the morning the week before. Come down, she said. I came down. She was wearing the charcoal coat, even though it was July and the coat was unnecessary, which I understood to mean that the coat was not weather. The coat was the version of herself she chose to wear when she was Vesper Calloway in public spaces. The coat was armor. She had come to me in armor, which told me something about the conversation we were going to have. I got in the car. She did not say anything for the first 3 blocks. The driver did not turn around. The man in the front passenger seat, who I had finally learned was named Costa and who had been with her since before she inherited the organization, did not turn around either. "Where are we going?" I asked. "To my home," she said. I looked at her. "I have decided," she said, "that the framework needs to be reconstructed, not eliminated, reconstructed. The reconstruction requires you to see what I am inside the place where I am most fully what I am." "That is a very Vesper Calloway sentence," I said. She did not smile. The corner of her mouth did the thing it did. I had become an expert in the corner of her mouth. "You should be able to walk away after seeing it," she said. "If you choose to walk away after seeing it, no element of your current life will change. Your apartment will stay paid. Your job will stay yours. The system around you will continue. I want you to know this before we arrive." "I know," I said. "You believe me," she said. It was not a question. It was a small, specific note of surprise. "I have always believed you," I said. "That has never been the problem." Her building was on the river the way I had always imagined it would be. Not flashy, not architectural. A solid older building with good bones and a doorman who had clearly been working there for 30 years and who recognized me on sight, which was its own piece of information about how often Vesper had spoken about me to her staff. We took a private elevator. The elevator went to the top floor. The top floor, it turned out, was the entire top floor, which was hers. She unlocked the door herself. Costa did not come up. He had stayed in the lobby with the doorman, which I had begun to understand was the protocol. Vesper went into her own home alone, and Costa watched the building from below. The apartment was not what I had expected. I had expected, I think, the version of luxury that announces itself: marble surfaces, expensive art chosen to impress, the kind of decor that lives in the magazines I had not read since I had been able to afford magazines. What I walked into was warm. The floors were old wood, polished but unrenewed. The kitchen was a working kitchen with a pot rack and a stove that had clearly been used. The living room had 2 couches that did not match each other, both of which looked like they had been chosen because they were comfortable. There was a wall of books, not display books, real books, with cracked spines and bookmarks sticking out of half of them. There was a piano in the corner. There were 3 plants, all alive, which surprised me more than anything else. Vesper set her keys in a small bowl on a side table. She took off the coat. She hung it on a hook by the door. Underneath the coat, she was wearing dark trousers and a white shirt. Just that. No jewelry, no watch. The coat had been the armor. The shirt was something else. "Sit," she said. I sat on one of the couches, the one that looked older. It was, as I had suspected, extremely comfortable. She went into the kitchen. She made coffee. She brought 2 cups. She handed me mine black, the way I had started drinking it after she had taught me without ever saying she was teaching me. She sat on the other couch. We were not close. We were on different couches. She set her coffee down. She looked at me across the small distance between us with the specific clarity of someone about to say a thing she had decided to say. "My father ran this organization for 41 years before me," she said. "He inherited it from my grandfather, who built it. I am the 3rd generation. The organization does many things in this city. Some of them are illegal. Some of them are merely unofficial. The illegal ones are not, in my preference, things involving women, children, or substances I will not allow to be moved. My father felt the same way. My grandfather did not. My grandfather is a long time dead. The organization under me does not move what I do not allow to be moved." I listened. "I have ordered 2 killings since I took over," she said. "Both were of men who were going to kill other people. I was responsible for protecting. Both occurred under circumstances where I had exhausted other options. Neither occurrence is something I regret. Both are things I think about regularly. I am telling you this because I do not want you to imagine I am only the version of myself that pulled you out of the alley. I am also the version of myself that made those 2 decisions." The kitchen hummed. The river was outside the window in the long evening light. "Continue," I said. She looked at me for a moment, registering that I had not flinched. Then she did continue. She told me about the structure of the organization, about the legitimate businesses: Calloway Holdings, the bookstore, 3 restaurants, a small chain of laundromats, 2 apartment buildings that operated in the open and paid taxes and were as boring as they appeared. She told me about the unofficial economy that ran underneath them, protection arrangements with smaller business owners, a network of safe apartments for women whose situations had become dangerous, a set of agreements with city institutions that she described carefully and without pride. She told me how much money the organization moved in a year, which was a number I did not have a frame of reference for. She told me how many people she employed directly, which was a smaller number than I had expected. She told me how many of those employees were women, which was a much larger percentage than I had expected. She told me about her father, about her mother, who had died when she was 11, about her older brother, who had been the heir until he had not been, which she described with the specific, careful distance of a person who had loved a brother and had also been forced to make decisions about what that brother was doing. She did not say what had happened to him. I understood she was not going to say. I understood that the not saying was part of what she was telling me. She told me about the years she had spent learning the organization from the inside before her father died. About the year after his death, when she had been 29 and had inherited a structure that several powerful men had assumed she would not be able to hold. About the specific decisions she had made in that year that had communicated to those men that their assumption had been incorrect. She told me about the foundation, about when she had started it, and why. About the women she had helped before there had been a foundation, when she had been doing it out of her own resources and with her own personal attention, and about the moment she had realized that the work needed a structure if it was going to scale beyond what she could personally manage. She told me, finally, about herself. She told me she had loved one person before me, a woman she had known in college, who had broken off the relationship at 22 when she had begun to understand what Vesper's family was. She told me that she had not blamed the woman for that decision, and that the experience had organized her around the assumption that the framework could not contain another person, and that this assumption had structured the next 14 years of her life, until October, when she had pulled me out of an alley and the framework had begun, slowly and without her permission, to reconfigure itself. She told me she had not been looking for me. She told me that she had thought, for the first 3 months, that her interest in me was simply the protective interest she felt for all the women she had helped, and that the bookstore notes had been the moment she had understood that her interest was not the protective category, which had alarmed her enough that she had stayed away from the bookstore deliberately. She told me she had read every note, twice, sometimes more. She told me that the night I had called her about the man, she had decided in the 18 minutes of driving over that she was no longer going to pretend the framework could hold this in the configuration she had been holding it in. She told me she had been working on the reconstruction since. She finished. She picked up her coffee. She drank it. I sat on the older couch in her warm apartment and listened to the river through the window and looked at the woman who had just told me, with the same precise economy she used for everything, the truth of her entire adult life. I said, "Thank you." She looked at me. I said, "For telling me, for trusting me with it. I understand what telling me costs. I understand that the trust is not symmetrical, because I do not have anything of equivalent weight to tell you back. I appreciate that you told me anyway. You have things of equivalent weight," she said. "You are simply 23 years old and have not been required to consolidate them yet." I almost laughed. She continued, "I have been a woman who runs a complicated organization for 9 years. You have been a woman who survived 2 years on the street after a family situation I have not yet asked you about, and who rebuilt herself in 9 months in a city that was actively trying to consume her. The weights are different. They are not unequal." I set my coffee down. I said, "Come here." She looked at me. I said, "Vesper, come here." She looked at me for a long moment. I watched her run, very quickly, every consideration she had been running for 9 months. I watched her register that I was not asking from the position of a woman who needed protection. I was asking from the position of a woman who had been choosing this for 9 months and was choosing it now in her apartment, with full information, with her permission to walk away if I needed to walk away, and with no intention of walking away. She stood up. She crossed the small distance between the couches. She did not sit down. She stood in front of me, looking down, with the specific stillness of a woman who had been waiting 9 months for a conversation to arrive at this point and was not going to rush its arrival now that it had. I reached up. I took her hand. It was the first time I had touched her. 9 months. The first time. Her hand was warmer than I expected. Her fingers were long. There was a small old scar across the back of her right hand that I had never noticed because I had never been close enough to see it. I pulled gently. She sat down beside me on the couch. We were not touching, except for my hand around hers. The couch was old enough that the cushions did not push us together. We were sitting in our own spaces, side by side, with my hand around hers in the small distance between. I said, "You are allowed to want this." She looked at me. I said, "I know you have spent 14 years deciding that you were not. I know that the deciding was not arbitrary. I know what the framework was protecting. I am telling you that I am not the woman from college, and I am not asking the framework to stop protecting you. I am telling you that the framework has reconstructed enough to hold this, and that you are allowed to be inside the reconstruction, and that I am not going to break." Her hand tightened around mine. The first response her body had given me that was not professional. I said, "Look at me." She looked at me. I leaned forward and I kissed her. It was not a long kiss. It was the kiss of a woman who had been waiting 9 months and who understood that the first kiss was not the place to put 9 months of waiting. It was a kiss that said, "This is starting." It was a kiss that said, "We have time." It was a kiss with my hand still around hers and her free hand coming up, slowly, to rest at the side of my neck, light, the same way her finger had traced my jaw 2 weeks ago, asking permission with the lightness rather than taking with the contact. I pulled back. I looked at her. Her eyes were the color I still had not been able to name, and they were doing something I had never seen them do, which was the specific opening that occurs in a person's face when they have stopped holding a thing they had been holding for a very long time. She said, "Marlo." I said, "I know." She said, "I have not done this in 14 years. I said, "I have not done this in any way that mattered. We are equally inexperienced at the version we are about to do." The corner of her mouth, on her actual mouth this time, did something. A small, almost smile. The first one I had ever seen on her actual mouth and not just in her eyes. "That is reassuring," she said. "It was not meant to be," I said. Then she did kiss me again. The second kiss was different than the first. The second kiss had 9 months in it. Her hand at my neck went up into my hair. My free hand came up to her face, tracing the line of her jaw the way she had traced mine 2 weeks ago, returning the gesture with the same lightness, the same asking. She made a small sound at the back of her throat that was not a sound I had heard her make before. We kissed for a long time. The river was outside the window. The light through the window was getting longer, rose gold and slow. The apartment was warm. We were not in a hurry. I had asked her to come here, and she had come, and we had 9 months of every careful proximity to dissolve in our own time, and we were going to take our own time. When we paused, my forehead was against hers, and her hand was at the back of my neck, and we were breathing the same air. She said, "You will stay tonight." I said, "Yes." She said, "In my room, to sleep. I am not asking for more than the staying tonight." I said, "I know. I understand. I want the staying." She said, "Okay." I stayed. She made me dinner. She was a competent cook in the way some people are competent cooks, not flashy, but precise. Every step done with the same economy she brought to everything. We ate at her kitchen table with a single lamp and the river outside. We talked about books for an hour. We talked about a film she had seen in March that I had not seen and that she described with the kind of attention that made me want to see it. We talked about my brother, whom I had not yet told her about, and she asked careful questions that did not push. And I told her the parts I was ready to tell her. After dinner, she took my hand and showed me the rest of the apartment. The library, which was a small room off the living room with a window that also faced the river, and which contained more books than I had thought one person could realistically own. The piano, which she did play, but only when she was alone and only in a way she described as embarrassingly amateur, and which I told her I was going to require her to demonstrate at some future point. A small balcony off the bedroom that I had not seen from the living room, with 2 chairs and a small table, and a view of the river that was not narrow and specific the way the view from my fire escape was, but the wide, unobstructed version, the view a person paid for. The bedroom was the smallest room in the apartment. I had not expected that. The bed was a normal bed, well made, with a soft gray cover and pillows that did not match. The walls had 2 paintings, both small, both old. The room had the same warmth as the rest of the apartment, the warmth of a person who lived here, not the warmth of a person who entertained here. She gave me a clean t-shirt of hers to sleep in. I changed in the bathroom. The shirt was too big. It smelled like the perfume I had first encountered in the back of her town car, the dry, clean scent I had been carrying in my memory for 9 months. I came back into the bedroom and she had changed too, into something simple, and she was sitting on the edge of the bed and looking at me with the same clear attention she had used in the alley and at the gala and on the sidewalk in June. The look this time was different. "Come here," she said. I came. I sat beside her on the edge of the bed. She took my hand. She turned it over and looked at the inside of my wrist where there was an old small scar I had gotten at 16, a thing I had not thought about in a long time. She did not ask. She brought my wrist to her mouth and kissed the scar once, lightly, the way you kiss something to acknowledge that you have seen it, and then she lowered my hand and held it. We slept. That was all that night. We slept. Side by side, in her bed that was smaller than I had expected, with her hand around mine on top of the cover. I woke once at 3 in the morning and she was awake too, looking at me, and she said nothing and I said nothing, and she traced one finger along my collarbone and then settled her hand at my waist, and we both went back to sleep. In the morning, she made me coffee. She had to leave the apartment at 9 for a meeting with someone whose name she did not give me and whose meeting I did not ask about. She told me I could stay for as long as I wanted. She told me Costa would walk me home if I wanted, or order me a car, or do nothing, depending on my preference. She told me she would be back at 6. She told me, with the specific, careful attention of a woman who had not said this kind of sentence in 14 years, that she would like me to be there at 6, and that if I was not there, she would understand. I was there at 6. I was there for many 6s after that. The framework had been reconstructed. I learned over the following months what its new architecture looked like. There were things she did not bring home. There were people she did not introduce me to. There were nights when she was working late on something I was not going to ask about, and she would call me and tell me she was working late, and I would say, okay, and she would say, thank you for not asking, and I would say, I am not asking because the asking is not the part of the framework I want, and she would say, I love you, in the small voice she had begun to use only for me, and we would hang up. She did say, I love you. The first time, 2 months in her kitchen, while I was scrambling eggs and she was reading the paper. She said it like she was reporting the weather. She said it once and did not repeat it and looked at me to see what I would do with the information. I said, I know. I love you too. The eggs are almost done. She said, okay. We ate the eggs. Neither of us said it again that day. The not saying was its own intimacy. Costa, who had been with her for 15 years before me, started saying good morning to me by name in the lobby, which Marie informed me was the closest thing to a public endorsement Costa had ever issued in his entire professional career. The doorman of her building started leaving me my own copy of the morning paper next to her copy. The woman who managed the foundation, whom I finally met at the November gala, told me without preamble that she had been wondering for 9 months who exactly the V was who had been routing book recommendations through the foundation's mail, and that she was glad to finally have a face to put with the recommendations. Pia from the bookstore figured it out before I told her. She did not say anything. She brought me coffee one morning and said, "Are you happy?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Good." We did not return to the subject for a year. My brother flew in to meet her in March. She made him dinner. He stayed for 3 days at a hotel, her hotel, the one I had spent 13 hours sleeping in 9 months prior, which was a coincidence so small and complete that neither of us mentioned it. He went home and called me from the airport and said, "She is terrifying." And I said, "I know." And he said, "She loves you." And I said, "I know." And he said, "Be careful, Marlo." In the voice he used when he was telling me the truth about something he could not protect me from. And I said, "I am being careful." He did not entirely believe me. He came around eventually. The coming around took him about 18 months. The thing that did it was not, in the end, anything dramatic. It was the small fact that I called him every Sunday for those 18 months, the way I had called him every Sunday for 2 years before he met Vesper, and that the calls did not change in tone or content or duration after he met her, and that I sounded, by his own eventual admission, more like myself in those calls than I had ever sounded in any phone call he had ever received from me in our entire shared lives. He told me this on a Sunday in the September of the second year, and he said, "Okay, Marlo, okay. I do not understand it. I am not going to understand it. But you sound like you are home, and I am going to trust you, and I am going to trust her by extension." I said, "Thank you." He said, "Tell her I said hello." I told her. Her face did the small thing it did. She said, "Tell him I said hello back, and that he is welcome here whenever he wants to come." He came back the following spring. He stayed at our apartment that time, in the small guest room she had quietly prepared for him months before he asked. He played her piano badly. She laughed at him out loud, a thing I had heard her do perhaps 4 times in our entire relationship, and he laughed too. And I sat on the couch and watched the 2 people I loved most in the world be in a room together without armor, and I understood that the framework had expanded again, the way it had been expanding in small increments for years, accommodating what it had once been built to exclude. The man with the bottle from October, I never saw him again, of course. But 2 years after the alley, I was in a small grocery store, 3 streets from my old apartment, picking up a single onion, when I saw him through the window. He was on the other side of the street, in a coat I did not recognize, walking with a kind of caution he had not had before, and he glanced once at the window of the grocery store as he passed. He saw me. He did not break stride. He did not look at me twice. He looked away, very deliberately, and continued walking, and turned the corner at the end of the block, and was gone. I bought my onion. I walked home. I did not tell Vesper about it. There was nothing to tell. The man had been told something, somewhere, by someone that had communicated to him that the woman in the grocery store window was not a woman he was permitted to look at twice. The communication had clearly held. There was no further action required. The framework had functioned exactly the way the framework was designed to function, which was the thing about the framework that I had finally understood after living inside it for 2 years. It was not violent because Vesper was violent. It was violent because the world that surrounded the women she protected was violent, and the framework had been built to hold the violence at a precise distance, and the precision was the gift. I told her eventually, 4 years in, that I knew about her brother. I had pieced it together slowly, through a combination of newspaper archives and the things she had said in the long, quiet evenings when we were alone. I told her on a Sunday morning, in her kitchen, while she was making coffee. She set the coffee down. She did not turn around for a long moment. Then she said, "Yes." I said, "I am not asking you to tell me about it." She said, "I know." I said, "I just wanted you to know that I knew. Because the framework includes me now. And I did not want there to be a piece of you that you were holding at a distance because you thought I would not be able to hold it." She turned around. Her face was doing the thing it had been doing more often. In the years we had been together, the openness she had not had access to for 14 years and had given me, slowly, in pieces, until her face in our private rooms was a different face than the face she wore anywhere else. She crossed the kitchen. She put her arms around me. She held me for a long time, in a way she had not held me before. The way you hold a person who has just told you they are not going anywhere. She said, "Thank you, Marlo." I said, "You are welcome, Vesper." We had our coffee. We are now 7 years on from the alley. We live in her apartment, which has slowly become our apartment, with a kind of accretion that has not had any single moment of moving in. My books are in the library. My clothes are in her closet. The plants there are 11 now, not 3 are mostly mine, and she has learned to water them when I am traveling, and she is, by her own admission, embarrassingly pleased with herself when they survive. She still wears the charcoal coat. The coat is still armor. The armor is still necessary. The organization is still complicated and still requires her full attention, and there are still nights when she comes home at 2 in the morning and sits in the kitchen for an hour before coming to bed because she needs the hour to put down whatever she has been carrying. I have learned to leave the kitchen light on for her on those nights. I have learned that she wants me asleep when she comes to bed, and that the wanting me asleep is not a rejection but a specific kind of love. She wants to come into our room and find me already there, breathing, alive, the thing that has not been taken from her. There was a night in the 3rd year when she came home with a small cut along the back of her hand that had not been there in the morning. She did not explain it. She did not need to. I cleaned it for her at the kitchen sink with the small first aid kit she kept in the cabinet under the coffee maker, and she stood very still while I cleaned it, and I bandaged it, and I kissed the bandage once, the way she had kissed the scar on my wrist on our first night, and she said nothing, and I said nothing, and she went to the shower, and I made her a sandwich, and we ate together at the kitchen table at midnight, and the cut healed in 11 days, and we never spoke about it. The not speaking was the love. The not speaking was the specific shape that love took between us. In the rooms where her work had to stay outside the door, but the cost of her work was sometimes still on her body when she came home, and the cost was something she carried into the apartment but did not unpack inside it. I did the cleaning. I did the bandaging. I did the small kiss. She did the staying still. The staying still was the trust. We had built the trust over the kind of years that build trust, which are years where neither person asks for more than the other person can offer, and where both people learn to read what the other person can offer on any given night without having to be told. There was another night, in the 4th year, when she came home at the regular time but did not eat dinner and did not speak for an hour, just sat on the older couch with a book she was not reading and looked at the river. I sat on the same couch beside her without touching her. I had learned by then that there were nights when touching her was the right answer, and nights when sitting beside her was the right answer, and the difference was something I had developed an instinct for. She did not move toward me. She did not move away. After an hour, she said, in a small voice, "A man I have known since I was 19 died today." I said, "I am sorry." She said, he was complicated." I said, "I know. I have not asked." She said, "Thank you." She set the book down. She put her head on my shoulder, which was not a thing she did often, which was a thing I had earned by the not asking. We sat that way for another hour. The river went dark outside the window. I learned, again, that the framework was not just hers. The framework had become ours. And ours included the men she had known since she was 19, and the complications she could not unpack, and the specific weight of grief that was not permitted to be public, and I could carry the framework's weight for the hour she needed me to carry it. Because I had learned how, because she had taught me how, because the teaching had been patient and detailed and 7 years long and ongoing. She still does not perform her work in front of me. I still do not ask. I have learned, over 7 years, the small adjustments by which she communicates to me whether a given week is a heavy week or a quiet week, whether I should attend an event with her or stay home, whether the framework is currently bearing more than its usual weight. We have a private vocabulary for this. The vocabulary is the thing I am most proud of all the things we have built together, because it took us 4 years to develop, and it works without either of us having to say very much. And the not saying is the language of two people who have learned to be present to each other across a complicated life. The foundation has tripled in size. We have housed, by the most recent count, 73 women and 41 children in safe arrangements over the past 7 years. The bookstore has a sister bookstore now, on the other side of the river. Marie runs both of them. Pia manages the inventory across the network. Pia's daughters are in college. Both of them know who Vesper is and what Vesper has done for their family, because Pia eventually told them. They send Christmas cards, like Pia does, and Vesper now writes back to those Christmas cards, in handwriting I have only ever seen used on cards that go to people in our small specific circle, because Vesper's handwriting in the wider world is something different and more careful. The piano is no longer embarrassingly amateur. She has been taking lessons for 3 years. She still only plays when we are alone. She is playing right now, in fact, in the next room. While I am writing this on the small desk by the window where I do most of my writing, I went back to school in the 3rd year, finished the degree I had not been able to finish before, and I write now, mostly essays, occasionally fiction. She does not read what I write until I tell her it is ready. When I tell her it is ready, she reads it the same evening, and gives me her opinion the following morning, and her opinion is always specific and always useful. I asked her, on the 7th anniversary of the alley, whether she ever thought about what would have happened if she had not been driving down that particular street at that particular time. She thought about it for a moment. She said, I drive down that street every Friday night between 10 and 11. I have done so for 9 years. There are 5 blocks of it where the lighting is bad and the foot traffic is wrong, and I have made it a personal practice to be present in those 5 blocks during those hours. I stared at her. You did this on purpose, I said. I have done it on purpose for 9 years, she said. I did not do it on purpose for you specifically. I did it on purpose for whoever was going to be in those 5 blocks at the wrong time. You happened to be the woman in the alley that night. The structure that put me in the alley with you was a structure I had built. The framework that prevented me from saying any of this for 9 months was also a structure I had built. The framework that allowed me to say it eventually was something I had to rebuild. I love you, I said. She said, I know. She said it like a person reporting the weather. I said, you do not have to be cool about it. You can say it back. She said, I love you, Marlo. I have loved you since approximately the 3rd book you left at the front desk, which is also approximately when I understood that I was going to have to rebuild the framework, although it took me another 6 months to admit it and 3 more after that to act on it. I have continued to love you in escalating increments for 7 years. The love is the most consistent input in my life. You are the most consistent presence in my life. You have made me, by a measurable margin, a less efficient executive and a more functional human being, and I have decided that the trade is worth it. I laughed. That is the longest sentence you have ever said in one breath, I said. She said, I have been working up to it for 7 years. You are welcome. She has been playing the piano in the next room this whole time. I am going to put down this pen and I am going to go listen to her play. The light through the window is the long rose gold light of a summer evening. The same light there was the first night I saw her apartment 7 years ago. And the river is outside, and the framework has held, and the framework has reconstructed, and the framework has space inside it for both of us, and tonight we are going to have dinner together at the kitchen table, and we are going to talk about a book she finished yesterday, and we are going to go to bed in the room that is now our room, and tomorrow we are going to wake up and do it again. She pulled me out of an alley once.